Hi, I'm Dr. Steve Klien from the Department of Communication at the University of Missouri. This is the latest in an ongoing video lesson series introducing you to the liberal art of rhetoric. In earlier videos in this series, we've taken Aristotle's definition of rhetoric as our primary foundation. For Aristotle, rhetoric is the ability in each particular case to identify the available means of persuasion. In earlier videos in the series, we've emphasized the first part of this definition, in each particular case, to emphasize the idea that rhetoric is situated. So now what we need to do is emphasize the second part of this definition, the available means of persuasion. How is it that a speaker can locate and select their available options in order to try to accomplish their goals with their audience? For Aristotle, the available means of persuasion were understood as what he termed artistic proofs, the means of persuasion that are constructed in messages by rhetoric, as opposed to, for instance, things like physical evidence or the pre-existing reputation or official title of a speaker. Those he would deem as inartistic proofs, things that aren't part of the art and craft of a persuasive message. For Aristotle, the three major categories of persuasive appeal were as follows: ethos, or ethical proof; pathos, emotional proof; and logos, or logical proof. In this video, we're going to focus on ethos. So what is ethos? Well, what we're going to do in this video is start by getting at Aristotle's definition to figure out, generally speaking, what is ethos and why is it important to persuasion. And then we're going to drill down into three specific categories of appeals that collectively are used to construct ethos in persuasive messages, what Aristotle referred to as good sense, good moral character, and goodwill. How did Aristotle define ethos? Well, we can turn to his Rhetoric to check it out. Persuasion is achieved by the speaker's personal character when the speech is so spoken as to make us think him credible. We believe good men more fully and more readily than others. So in other words, what we're talking about when we think of ethos is the ethical character of the speaker. In other words, credibility. To what extent can the audience actually profitably believe what the speaker is saying? And for Aristotle, there were three primary ways in which a speaker would use rhetorical appeals in order to convince the audience of their credibility. Good sense, what the ancient Greeks referred to as phronesis, or practical wisdom. Good moral character, what the Greeks referred to as arete, or virtue. And goodwill, what the Greeks referred to as eunoia. So let's take each of these in turn and see how they operate. Good sense ethos is what's referred to in contemporary persuasion theory as competence. In other words, you can believe me because I know what I'm talking about. Speakers either explicitly or indirectly construct a sense of good sense or competence when they do things like emphasize their knowledge and expertise, their relevant experience in the area that they're speaking about. They are presenting their message in ways that appear logical, rational, and reasonable. And occasionally, they'll make reference to their relevant authority or power that's recognized as legitimate by their audience in order to get a deference with regard to competence or good sense. There are a variety of reasons why this speaker knows what they're talking about, so I can believe them. Good moral character ethos is what we refer to in contemporary persuasion theory as trustworthiness. In other words, you can believe me because I demonstrate the right values. So sometimes this is done explicitly by a speaker, but often it's done indirectly in any kind of appeal that articulates certain moral values or ethical principles that the audience embraces as important. The audience wants to be able to recognize that this speaker has a sense of right or wrong, good or bad, and not just they believe those things, but they actually play out in their behavior or conduct. And so a speaker who articulates this capacity in a speech earns the audience's trust. Developing a sense of common ground with the audience in identity and shared principles is absolutely important. You can imagine, for instance, if a speaker were to articulate moral values, for instance, say on a controversial issue like abortion, to audience members who hold moral values on that issue that are diametrically opposed to the speaker, well, it doesn't matter to some extent if the speaker is articulating moral values, because many in the audience will see them as immoral and unethical. So that's not going to work. What a speaker needs to do is convince the audience that we share a common identity, and thus you know that my values and ethics are sound because they're the same values and ethical principles that you and the audience have. When we're talking about goodwill, what in contemporary persuasion theory we refer to as, well, goodwill. We didn't come up with something else for that. Goodwill essentially means you can believe me because your best interests are my priority. Think about it. The people that we tend to distrust are the people from whom we get a sense that they're really in it for themselves. They're in it for their own financial gain, or they're in it for their own political gain. They're really not thinking about me. So if I have a sense that the speaker is really not just looking out for themselves, but they're looking out for me and the things that are important to me, the speaker is exhibiting goodwill. So, for instance, constructing a lack of bias or self-interest. The speaker is being objective, or if the speaker does have a particular position or perhaps a sense of bias or slant, the speaker is self-reflexive and transparent about it. These are the things I believe, and this is where my argument, where my sense of truth is coming from. To an extent that an audience can trust that, okay, I can see where this person is coming from, and they don't have some kind of underlying motivation to manipulate and distort. They're really looking out for and respecting me. When a speaker establishes empathy with the needs and wants of the audience, that is fundamental to establishing goodwill. The speaker is trying to convince me to believe something or to do something, not just because they're going to benefit, but because I'm going to benefit from doing this. It's in my own best interests. And speakers often do this by adopting a you and a we orientation. In other words, using lots of second-person language and first-person plural language. Speakers that don't talk about I, me all the time, but are talking about you in the audience, things that are important to you and your family and your community. Or talking about the way that we're all together by using words like we and us and our. We're all in this together. Those are also really important moves for goodwill. So if we summarize Aristotle's ethos, we can understand it as persuasive appeals to the ethical character and credibility of the speaker. And in order to accomplish that, in order to get the audience to recognize that the speaker is credible, a speaker will engage in a variety of persuasive appeals in three major categories: good sense, good moral character, and goodwill. If you have any questions about the content of this video, please don't hesitate to reach out by communicating with me personally or by leaving a comment. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.